NBC Radio. Jump on the KCAA Express. Call 909-793-1065. That's 909-793-1065 and get ready to transmit.
KCAA.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali. I am attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. This week, like every week, we'll be discussing critical legal and social justice issues impacting our community. Today, we'll be discussing the Russia's attempt to suppress the black vote, top stories of 2018. We'll also talk a little bit about the government shutdown and President Trump's wall, as well as a little bit about our syndication that's going to be beginning next year. I want to begin with a quote by one of the legendary UCLA basketball coaches, John Wooden, who basically stated that the team that makes the most mistakes win. And that's one of my favorite quotes. Again, the team that makes the most mistakes win. And I think that what he is talking about is those individuals who are willing to take chances. Individuals who aren't willing to take chances, unfortunately, aren't able to maximize their potential or maximize the things that they're capable of doing, which is really, really important. And that reminds me a lot is as you go through life and as you're trying to take those chances, there are people who do, and those are people who talk about doing, right? And when you're talking about the people who talk about doing, basically some people, unfortunately, in life feel that another person's failure is their success. So, and I really don't co-sign to that ideology of utilizing my time of tearing down other individuals. I think that we should utilize our time in trying to build up ourselves, and that tends to be one of the biggest problems. And of course, we always begin the show by giving some sort of quote that I believe that is motivational to our listeners, who I believe that appreciate the fact that we utilize our time to build people up. We do not utilize our time to tear people down. So that's one of our quotes that we want to begin with today. Now, I want to start out with our first story is the issue about and we've been dealing with this Russian thing for quite some time, the Russian collusion situation. But I want to start out with one of the headlines that we've been hearing at least for the last couple of weeks, actually a little bit longer than that. I believe actually the NAACP had went out on some sort of campaign to encourage African Americans from using Facebook for a week to shut it down. And I believe it's kind of in some ways connected to this whole Russian propaganda that was targeting African Americans to influence the 2016 election. It says that in one of the Guardian is one of the papers that I was reading, and it was an article that was written by John Swain. It says that Russian online propagandists aggressively targeted African Americans during the 2016 U.S. election campaign to suppress votes for Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump, according to new research. The analysts found that Russian operatives used social media to confuse, distract, and ultimately discourage black people and other pro-Clinton blocs from voting using bogus claims such as Clinton receiving money from the Ku Klux Klan. And black turnout declined in 2016 for the first presidential election in 20 years. And according to the U.S. Census Bureau, the black turnout fell to less than 60% from a record high of 66.6% in 2012. And so the question is, what does that mean? I mean, why would Russia be in such a be so encouraged and go out on a campaign to specifically suppress the African American vote, to suppress votes for Hillary Clinton, and to be so supportive of Donald Trump? I mean, what would be? I mean, there's two questions. I think that we have to look at this from two different angles. Number one is the whole idea that the Russians are going to capitalize on the racial issues within the United States as a way of splitting our country, right? And what does that really say? I mean, what does that really tell us about the fact that the world has understood that the America's weakness is our racial division, and that they understand that as long as they can incite that racial division, that ultimately will ultimately destroy our country. I think they understand that, and by using that type of propaganda and dividing us, and also they probably understood that by electing Donald Trump, that would continue to divide us even more, which would make us extremely vulnerable to, you know, people being able to come into the country and ultimately destroying ourselves, right? So, I mean, I think that the first question, and I'm gonna talk to you first, Rosa, with regards to the issue of Russia's using this propaganda in order to do that. I mean, what do you see as, number one, the reason why Russia, number one, would want Donald Trump to be the president of the United States, and number two, why would they specifically target African Americans as a way of being able to achieve that goal?
Well, firstly, I think that one of the reasons as to why they were interested in having Donald Trump become our president is because not only that would help with dividing us internally, but also internationally. If we see what's going on internationally, there's a lot of things that have really separated us from other countries, including our allies, and that's a key player in helping and aiding those other countries like Russia in picking up the pieces, the broken pieces that the U.S. has left internationally. And internally, I feel like black votes overall throughout our history have been targets. They continue to be invoked. Voter suppression against black people continues to be invoked, as it was in the segregation era, as an excuse to kind of crack down on the rights of blacks and poor whites. And I feel like we did see a lot of kind of turnout from individuals coming out to vote for Barack Obama in 2008. And now seeing as how there was a big turnout of black and African American votes, I think it would be something beneficial for them to kind of put a tamper on these black individuals who were going to vote, because they very well knew that they were going to end up voting for a Democrat candidate, since that's how they performed in the other election. Right. So
it's interesting when we talk about voter suppression and how strong that is. I think that sometimes, I mean, we forget historically how they spent so much time and so much effort in basically literally killing people, not just for voting, but just killing people from registering to vote.
Exactly.
And how powerful, you know, that issue is, and how they have always targeted, you know, specifically African Americans as the people that they want to suppress the most, right? And so, you know, I mean, I guess that there's a couple of ways that you can look at that as far as suppressing the African American vote, is because if you're suppressing the minority and the African American vote, ultimately what you're doing is you're basically being able to control democracy, right? So, I mean, Bilal, I mean, why is it that you feel that, why is it so much of an effort to always try to suppress? I mean, because we're looking at not only, and we'll go back to the whole issue of the Russian propaganda and their issue. But my thing is, I mean, we seen that voter suppression, especially even in the last election, where they were doing all kinds of different things, like, you know, closing down polling places, trying to confuse people, you know, about voting. I mean, why is it that they really go out of their way to try to make sure specifically the African American precincts and minority precincts, in fact, because typically when you're talking about these urban communities, you're almost not always talking about African Americans. You know, you're talking about African Americans, although they may be the predominant group within some of these communities. But, you know, like in New York, different places, even in the South, generally you have an African Americans, poor whites, as well as, you know, Puerto Ricans and other individuals like that. But specifically African Americans. Why do you think they always target us?
I think that we are a key to a lot of things in this country in terms of voting. And I think that when that consciousness is awakened and that we realize that we are important, that we have this voice, then no one can stop us from doing what we need to do in order to have certain bills, in order to have certain legislation passed, so forth and so on. And I think with the election of Barack Obama, I think that consciousness was waking. And what they tried to do at that particular time was to go inside of the polling booth and discredit people and not allow us to do all of these things or to express ourselves by way of vote. And so with this new election that's coming, with this new election after Barack Obama, that 6% made the difference. And Russia came in and did what they had to do in order to discredit it with all of these different articles, so forth and so on. But I think that once we begin as a people begin to realize that we have this power in this voice that cannot be stopped, then, it's inevitable to the amount of accomplishments that we can have in the future. And right now, by them doing all of this stuff, I think the people are listening. I think the people are seeing that we have to do what we have to do in order to put people in office that we want in office. And I think that this past election was that voice that was expressed because of all of this propaganda and all of this little crookedness that had been done. And I think we see a reflection of that with this last election with a lot of people that was getting into office.
Right. I mean, that's the whole idea. I mean, Doc, when you talk about the issue of fear, I mean, that's kind of the whole game, that basically is being played with regards to. Now, you have to understand, I mean, so you got Russia who's saying, okay, basically what we're going to do is we're going to try to suppress the black vote. And the only reason that they're trying to suppress the black vote, I mean, obviously is two reasons. Number one is to encourage someone like Donald Trump, or we want Donald Trump as the guy that we want to become the president of the United States. And now what we can do is we understand that basically it's the most powerful nation in the world, right? I mean, it's so powerful, and the only way that you can destroy that kind of power is you destroy it from within, right? So that's kind of how you do. You tear down, powerful nations to begin to start fighting with each other. I mean, I think the one of the immediate examples that come to my mind is the former Soviet Union. How powerful the former Soviet Union was. And sometimes I think that we forget how powerful they really were. And we also understand that basically during the Cold War, the whole idea, it was pretty much a proxy war, right? And so, in other words, now what you're doing is that people have become smart. I mean, so in other words, somebody's peeped your game. So now that we've peeped your game and we understand that the way that you destroy a superpower is you try to destroy it from within, then what they're doing is they're going out and saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to create this use social media. We're going to suppress the black vote, and at the same time, we're going to incite people. Now that you've got Donald Trump to become the president of the United States, the country is more divided, or is as divided as it has ever been. And now we're so occupied with when is the last time have you seen our country spend so much time on domestic issues, right? And I can't remember in a time where we've seen so much controversy on domestic issues, and now we've completely abandoned even the discussion of foreign issues. The only foreign issue that we talk about is building a wall. That's the closest thing that we've come to it, and that even divides us even more, because now what you're doing is, the whole idea of building this wall and keeping, our neighbors, to the north of us out of the country, is that even divides us. It's all division talk, right? So the whole idea of not allowing those individuals to come into this country is like a code word. You know what I mean? And the code word is, keep the brown people out. It's not about immigrations, right? Because immigrations it means more than Mexico. But if you say immigrations now, the only person that comes to your mind is a Mexican. Immigrations, we have them all over the world. We're not even talking about, as much about Muslims anymore or about people in the Middle East. That's not really even part of our discussion, right? We're not talking about, beefing up security at the airports, making our airports safe, making our water, all this. We're talking about building a wall, right? Which is, we'll talk about the shutdown later on. But Doc, I want you to talk about a little bit about this whole idea of the Russian, targeting specifically African Americans, and I think that speaks volumes to, the vulnerability of our country and the significance of how racism is going to be utilized ultimately, the tool that they're going to use for our demise.
Well, all good points have been made. Power through oppression will never last. When we look at the whole sphere of politics, we have to think about, what are we really talking about? Voters dictate the policy, the politics. Politics dictate the policies that a country will operate from. So if I'm going to suppress a specific group of people, in this case marginalized people, black, brown, poor, whites, etc., what that is going to do is extrapolate them from the actual charter building policy development of the given region in which they sit. Now, what is the bigger goal here? The bigger goal here is for those individuals in power to maintain that power. If I start changing the policies that they stood upon to acquire that power, guess what? I'm going to start losing that power, and I'm not going to be able to be privileged to the degree that I have been. In the case of Russia, and I think you hit it spot on, Brother Ali, what is the easiest thing to incite in this country? The emotionalism of racism. Yep. So if I can distract and get this country not thinking on a strategic platform, but thinking on an emotional platform, I not am worried about what the Americans do. I'm worried about positioning my country throughout the world. This is much bigger than a national venue from the Russian standpoint. They are the premier successors when it comes to positioning in this international front. Now, China's coming up in a big way, but Russia's been in the ball game for so much longer, and it knows the tactics. So really what I think we have going on here is a accumulation of trying to maintain that power. Brother Minister Malcolm said it so well. He said Democrats and Dixiecrats are no different. And how are we not in a position to not be defining what we need from the political system? Why is it that we have these individuals that are dictating our policies? We should be dictating to them what we expect from them as politicians, and if they don't give it to our communities, we won't vote for them.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's interesting. And also one of the things that I was thinking about, Rosa, where it says that the new findings on the secret activities of, they call it the Internet Research Agency, right? Known as the as the Russian government's troll factory, right? So I mean, they actually have a particular organization that is committed to doing that. It says that were revealed. It says they were revealed in a pair of reports to the U.S. Senate's Intelligence Committee, and one of them was led by experts from the Oxford University, and the other one by New Knowledge, an American cybersecurity firm. And it says New Knowledge said that Russia had waged a 5-year propaganda war against the U.S. public. And the Oxford researchers said that while the propaganda was meant to push and pull Americans in different directions, what is clear is that all of the messaging clearly sought to benefit the Republican Party and specifically Donald Trump. So you have the Senate Intelligence Committee, and you have the Oxford researchers and New Knowledge, right? New Knowledge, which I think is actually part of the Oxford Research organization, actually specifically wanting to benefit the Republican Party and Donald Trump to come into power.
You're talking about digital diplomacy.
Right.
That's what they're doing nowadays. You talk about Trump posting on there talking about a wall. You know, the world is watching, and what they were doing is basically having individuals create pages on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter to kind of skew the election to favor the Republican Party with posts that kind of talked about Hillary Clinton being a war hawk and Trump just being more friendly and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
And what's also crazy about it is that you think about Donald Trump now, who basically, tweets everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's amazing now that you've gone out of your way to make him the president. It says that both reports faulted the major social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, and Google, for what they said were ongoing failures to turn over exalt. So obviously those were the organizations that were being used, and basically without any, it's almost like, how smart are they? Right, to understand that now they've went out of their way to put this person into power, and now that you put him into power, he uses social media on a consistent basis to divide our country.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you can remember back some years ago, I remember reading an article where Donald Trump said, if I was to ever run for president, I would run as a Republican because they're very gullible. And I think that this thing with the Russia, as far as 5 years ago, this thing has been put in place many years ago. Yeah. And I think that it started then in order to work its way up to where it is today. And I think that the reason why Russia pinpointed African Americans, like I say, and it goes back to what the doc said, that we have a voice. If we was to unite, we have a voice, and we don't need no political party. We don't need Democrats or Republicans, because our voice is strong enough to change the dynamics of this whole country.
Yes,
and that's why Russia aimed towards African Americans or minorities. That was the reason why, because they knew that this was the point that they needed. Like I say, going back to that 6.6%. That's what was needed to get him, and they got that 6.6%. And I don't care if it was like no lives matter to Hillary Clinton. That was a good topic. Who thought of that, to just jump on something like that? Black lives matter, but they said no lives matter to. We was going to automatically jump on it. Look at how many likes that post alone got. So yeah.
I mean, it's crazy too. I mean, when you think about it. I mean, because the reality, this is when you get down to it, the reality of it is that the real issue in our country is obviously the suppression and the way and oppression of African Americans in this country, and the history of it is obviously a big issue. But the bigger issue is the division.
Yes.
So the whole idea is, could you imagine how strong America would ultimately be? And imagine how fearful the world was when Barack Obama became the president of the United States. Not because he was a black president per se, but the fact that you have a nation that at some point in time, at least from the someone from the outside looking in, is could America really begin to start uniting and really becoming, standing for the principles for which it says it stands for? Can you imagine if there was, if we were the racial harmony was at its height, right? And how strong that America would be, and we would be, nobody could touch us, right? Yeah. And then we would be able to create things and create legislation and be a great country, right? Because the reality of it is that the people that are suffering from in America are don't understand how to deal with it because they're distracted. So the way that you get people to vote against their interest, is you create that division, right? And it's that's just part of life, right? Instead of just saying, okay, well, let's not focus on our division. Let's just begin to start saying, okay, we're going to have this serious dialogue about race in this country, and we really are going to be on a mission to eradicate this issue, and then we're going to really unite as a country, right? And so they understand that, and so the whole idea is like, okay, I can't let that happen. If I let that happen, then America would be, nothing could touch them. So now that what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm going to bring out those old wounds. And now you're hearing, and it's amazing because you're hearing rhetoric that you have not heard, in years, Doc. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these are things that I thought that we would never hear again. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, we just think about the fact that the Ku Klux Klan, their membership had almost diminished. And now they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, how could that possibly happen? What are how could you be mad at this point? You know what I'm saying? And basically what you've done is they're brilliant.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, they're brilliant because they're able to tap into our weaknesses.
Yes.
And the weaknesses is our fear.
Exactly.
Right? And it's like it's pseudo fear because it's not real. Right? But they've been able to tap into it, and obviously they're going to begin to start talking about the division of the Klan, and let's make America great again. This whole thing. I mean, we're consumed on a daily basis of talking about race in a way that we haven't talked about it in a long time.
Yeah.
Well, when you reflect on your words, look, all anybody has to do that's not from this country is sit back and watch the historical perspective of how this country is operated. Every social movement has been crushed by divide and conquer tactics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every one. So all I would have to do is see what actually works in the process and then use it. And that's exactly what is happening. Going back to your earlier point, Brother Ali, look, in order for this country to espouse to that level of greatness, and I think you hit on a vein there when you're talking about others looking at the unstoppability of this country. But what would that do? In order for us to be that beacon, that means there would have to be a readjustment of the economic dynamic in this country. There would have to be a readjustment of the social equity or unequity in this country. There would have to be more of an equitable sense of operation for the people within this country. Right. That would be where your strength would come from, because above all else, I could disagree with politics, but if my survival mechanisms is in place, if the country is supporting me to where I can at least navigate and have hope for a brighter future, I'm going to stand with that country. Now, if I divide the country and take that away, which division does, then that's going to create that internal chaos that this country has been dealing with this as inception of itself as a country.
Yeah, that's it. And then Rosa, I was reading the Washington Post story. It says in fact the Russians were devoted to supporting the Republican presidential candidacy of Donald Trump, undermining Democrat Hillary Clinton, and using black voters as the main vehicle. And this is a quote. It says messaging to African Americans sought to divert their political energy away from established political institutions by preying on anger with structural inequalities faced by African Americans, including police violence, poverty, and disproportionate levels of incarceration. And said the report by the Computational Propaganda Research Project. Now here you got Russia focusing on propaganda based upon police violence, poverty, and disproportionate levels of incarceration. Now, for the last 5 years, that's been a big topic.
It works.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so, think about in social media how often you've seen those issues come up. I mean, it's like on a daily basis. It's it's like a series, isn't it?
Yeah. There was actually a story of a boxing, a trainer that trains low-income kids in a community to box. And he says how he was actually influenced by a couple of these posts to kind of have that mentality of boycotting the election, not running to the polls to vote, and instead training his kids to kind of defend themselves when they're out there and what are their rights when it comes to training them to box.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can see that in not only just this story, but many other stories of individuals who kind of have come out and said that, yes, indeed, they have been influenced by a lot of social media posts. And if you think about it, it's true. A lot of us, where do we get our information? A lot of the time, sadly, the average American is Facebook, Twitter, social media.
Right.
And it has become the norm.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a trip because it wasn't so much to sway the African American vote towards Donald Trump. It was just saying that Hillary Clinton is no different than Donald Trump, and so they was left to believe we was left to believe that, okay, no matter who we vote against, we gonna get the long, we gonna get this short end. So we might as well not vote at all. And I don't know if anyone can remember there was a video that was posted with an African American lady that was approaching Hillary Clinton doing one of her little campaigns, and she pushed him off. I mean, that video alone, I mean, it received so many shares, and so many people were angered and outraged over the fact that Hillary Clinton pushed the African American lady away. And I mean, that was one of the one of the tactics. I mean, because I saw it and I say, man, the hell with it, what the, you know.
But Bilal, to your point, you know, and the ingeniousness of the Russians. Look, we know the Republican Party has not done much of anything for black people, but when you look at Hillary's record, when you look at Bill Clinton's record, they have introduced some of the most destructive bills and laws and policies that has destroyed not only our community, but marginalized communities across this country. So it was so easy to step away from not voting for her. What they did, and I think the effectiveness and the geniusness of it, they had more people of marginalized communities not vote at all.
Exactly.
See, they didn't vote for the Republican, they didn't vote for the Democrat, and so that automatically increased the Republican numbers, and hence that's why we got the president we got.
Right. It says, and then also in the Washington Post, it goes on to say that unlike the Republican sledgehammers used to suppress votes and thwart electorates' decisions in various states, the Russians are sneaky, using social media come-ons that ostensibly had little to do with the 2016 vote. In fact, the Russians were devoted to supporting the Republican presidential candidacy. We talked about that of Donald Trump, but that was kind of the thing. And it says, now the question for Washington is what the Republican-dominated government will do to protect the integrity of the electoral process, particularly the black community, from foreign and domestic actors who seek to damage democracy, right? And so, you know, I mean, it's critical, you know, now that we're coming into a point. I think that we're not, you know, it's kind of like one of those things where, are we really going to find ourselves in a situation of a point of no return? Are people really going to, it's really about pride now, because most of the individuals who ultimately supported, you know, President Donald Trump, really, I mean, you know, it's hard for someone to come back and say, you know what, I was wrong. I really should not have, he was really not the guy. You know what I'm saying? I was really voting really against, I was letting my emotion get the best of me because I was angry about a lot of things, right? But emotion, you know, tactically, you know, it's like some people play chess and playing checkers, right? And so it's like, I'm going to play checkers because I'm mad right now. I'm upset about things that really are not significant when it comes to the greater good of our democracy. You know what I'm saying? So I'm upset about some things that happen, you know, whether during the time, you know, it's like when you hear the rhetoric about, you know, the Democrats won't admit this, you know what I'm saying, or the liberals won't admit that, or, you know, and kind of like, you know, you know, so it's kind of like the whole political party situation anyway, you know, where the whole politics and the splitting of the parties, you know, I'm not going to say I agree. Clearly, I don't agree with everything that the Democrats do, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that so-called liberals do. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe, because I mean, who does, right? So, or who should? I mean, there are some people who basically, you know, choose a party line, stick to the party line, and don't do anything outside of the party and blame, you know, specifically one party or the other, right? Which makes no sense, because I mean, obviously there's things like, you know, either you're drawing this line in the sand, and you do that because people are too lazy to think for themselves, right? And so and some people, to their fault, will support Donald Trump. And not even paying attention. They're not really paying attention to what he's really saying, because obviously everything, you know, he is saying some things that obviously he's able to capture people's emotions and able to capture people's vulnerability and their weaknesses, and by making those statements about, you know, building the wall, you know, about them coming over to our country, and they're, you know, all these individuals that are coming over to the country are basically part of, you know, the Mexican mafia or some sort of big time drug cartel. You know, well, let's just back up and let's talk about that drug cartel. The only reason that the drug cartels are able to be successful in America has nothing to do with Mexico.
Exactly.
The reason why drug cartels are successful in America is because they allow them to come over here and sell drugs.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
If there was not a market for it, it would not happen.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, you know, you have to ask yourself that question. You cannot tell me that without the corruption of our own government, would any of that ever really be successful? It would not be successful. It's successful because it is allowed to happen.
Exactly.
Right?
and demand.
Corrupt DEA agents, corrupt, you know, political officials. I mean, we have the ability. I mean, I know how strong our military is. I mean, I'm a veteran. I know that we have the strongest military there is in the world. Right? Now, you're going to tell me that we're able to secure countries overnight, but we cannot stop illegal drugs from coming over the country from Mexico? I mean, you really believe that? Do you believe if there was an effort, if someone says, you know, we're not going to build a wall, we're going to stop these drugs from coming over to the country, we're going to have an all-out war on drugs, not on individuals and building a wall, but we're going to stop that, the issue. Nobody's coming into this. I mean, if all the drugs are coming from Mexico, then why are they coming over here? They can just stay over there and just get high, I guess. I don't know what they're doing. But that's not really the case. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to be smart sometimes and understand the way that the game works. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the same way with the fact of our drug enforcement agencies targeting certain communities, right? Like when the cocaine wars, right? Now, come on, where do you think the cocaine comes from? Right? You don't create the cocaine in, you know, Brownsville. You don't create cocaine in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? Or in Queens or the Bronx or Brooklyn. Where is it coming from? Right? They're flying this stuff in.
Exactly.
And they know where it's coming from. But they're not stopping these people from doing that. You know what I'm saying? And you know, it's all game. And they realize, and basically the Russians realized it before we did.
Exactly.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? They realized it basically. They know this is not happening.
Yes, sir.
You know, just like I was listening to I think it's the former president of Mexico. You know, now this fool gets on and he says he's gonna make us pay for his wall.
It was the former.
I'm gonna build a wall and I'm gonna make Mexico pay for it.
Yeah.
Right? And so now because Mexico's not gonna pay for it, so now I'm shutting down the government.
Yeah. And you
until you give me my wall.
Yeah. Yeah, and you hurt your own citizens. Now you're turning people against you. 800,000 federal employees, you turning against you. You know, that's that inner chaos that we spoke about, you know, and that's what brings government down, is the inner chaos. And I think Russia is a bigger picture. It's a bigger who's going to be the next superpower.
Yeah. Exactly. Russia might give him the money to build a wall.
Who knows?
That might be the source of his money. You know what I'm saying?
Who knows?
Yeah.
At this point.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, the thing about it is I've been wrong before. But I'm man enough to say, you know, I was wrong. Whether it's about a candidate, let me just say this. You know, even, you know, I'm a big fan of Barack Obama. I think that Barack Obama, given what he had to deal with, I think he did a great job. But if Barack Obama had came into office and did what this dude was doing, I wouldn't co-sign it.
No.
Yeah.
Do you think that if Barack Obama came into office and says, if you don't give me the money to build a wall, I'm going to shut down the government?
Yeah.
Do you think I would co-sign that?
No.
I would say, man, this dude is done flipped out, man. What's done happened to him, man? I mean, I would go out and he would be criticized for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I want you to think for 1 second. It's like, you know, the biggest problem in our country is building a wall between the United States and Mexico. That is such a big problem. I'm going to shut down the government.
Yeah. even though immigration from Mexico to the U.S. has declined for
Dropped.
46% over
Yeah.
the past few years.
But see, I think it's a distraction. I think we have to look much deeper. The wall and these other venues are merely distractions to keep us on an emotional tangent while we really are blinded by what's happening internationally. We have lost so much international status, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, it is, man. And then you got to, I mean, I just can't, I just can't even articulate how ridiculous that is.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So yeah, man. So we at the end of the. That's how we end off the year, right?
Yeah.
With shutting down the government if he doesn't get his fence.
And even if he builds a wall, there was actually an article. I was in Mexico this past week, and they were saying we build tunnels, so build a wall.
That's right.
Exactly. I don't think it's gonna make a big
No,
difference in
no.
anything.
No,
Either
man.
you build a tunnel or you fly a plane.
Yeah.
Either way, you know.
Right.
Come on.
I mean, it's gonna create a new market.
Have you seen any wall internationally that has been able to hold?
Yeah.
Exactly.
No.
I mean, it's gonna create a new hustle,
Yeah.
a new way of getting them over here.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's all kinds of ways. I mean, plus most people get over here because they're able to, somehow get with some sort of immigration official and give them enough money and they let them across the border. How many people do that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
How many stories have I heard, where individuals said we had it all set up. So when I went there,
That's right.
I'd already had the situation made up. I went to the
That's
border,
right.
and I said X, Y, and Z, and they let me across because I've done paid this person off. Corruption.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The wall is not going to
News.
stop corruption.
Exactly.
I mean, so yeah, they don't need to go to the wall. They can. A lot of people come right across, in front of the border patrol agent.
Yeah.
Prime example was prohibition,
Yeah.
where you stopped alcohol, so you thought, and you increased the demand
Yeah.
significantly, and you had more people in the process. You're going to do the same thing in this situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's crazy, man.
Well,
So now that we end of the year, we're gonna talk a little bit about 2018 and what was our. We had how many episodes this year? 52.
52.
52 episodes.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard to believe.
That's hard to believe.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't
Right.
either.
Yeah. So
52.
Wow.
what was your favorite story of the year, Rosa?
I think mine was when we really touched on the basis of diplomacy. And we talked about China as an incoming power in the international world. I'm actually getting into reading Cracking Down the China Conundrum by the man Yukon, who was the president of the World Trade Organization at one point in his career. And just reading that and looking at different stories just coming up and how this coalition, the BRICS coalition, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are coming together, and how, I keep watching UN Security Council kind of meetings because they have them live actually. And just seeing how Nikki Haley responds to a couple of their questions and tries to evade a couple of the issues that are brought up. It really is something that really impresses me and lets me see that the United States it's really in danger, not only domestically with everything that's happening and how we're so divided, but internationally and how we're doing in that. So I think that was one of my favorite topics for this year. Yeah.
It was, and it's one of those topics that basically people, and when we're talking about what's going on in the world, I think that people really aren't really paying attention to China and the fact that it's, like I said, peep game.
Yeah.
Peep game, and understand, the significance of building up, relationships around the world and the importance of diplomacy and being safe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's part of what they're doing. I mean, people are always loyal to the people who support them the most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, and if you're not taking care of people around the world, then the people around the world are they're gonna go to the ones that's gonna take care of them, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So that was. What about you, Bilal? What was your favorite story of the year?
Well, actually, I had two, but I had to boil down to one, and the two was the absence of fatherhood as well as bullying. But I think I settled with the absence of fatherhood because I think that if we were to eliminate that problem, then we would eliminate the problem of all of the bullying. And so I think that is very critical that we continue to address that issue, because it's an issue that that hunts our community and hunts our youth, year in and year out, and the cycle continues. And I think that until we get a hold of that and try to make some of these fathers stand up to accountability and take care of their children, being their maintainers, their providers, to that we're going to continue to see an escalating problem with our youth, whether it be suicide rate, whether it be the gangs, whether it be the incarceration rate, so forth and so on. And I think the root cause of that is that there's an absence of the father, teaching men how to be, young boys how to be men, and also giving the young ladies that what's that word, to validate their daughters, so forth and so on. And I think until we see, a change in that, we're going to continue to see chaos in the communities and stuff amongst our youth.
I think that's important too. I really enjoyed that episode, and that is, in our communities, I mean, that's always been a big issue, and and you're right. I mean, if you're going to see any kind of progress within our own communities, that's going to, we're not going to go very far.
Yeah.
We're going to be running in place.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Doc? What was your favorite?
Well, actually, I had two, and I couldn't divide. One was the one that we deal with, community violence, and that's predicated on the fact that I'm a practitioner, I'm on the ground. So being a practitioner, I look for tangible answers and solutions. So all the shows, and most of the shows, actually all the shows were outstanding, but those that I feel we could get some answers in. And then, as Rosa said, the international piece, speaking before the United Nations in Switzerland and in New York, and watching how they develop policy to change the global perspective, being there and participating in developing the white paper that is being utilized now, that moved me, because I actually see on the international level how we can articulate, how we can bring justice from the shows to that venue and really change the worldwide dynamic. And on the community piece, being that I feel that's something we can actually tangibly go in and change. When you talk about trauma, we've got to realize that, when we talk about community violence, it all stems from trauma. It deals from the inability to deal with the stress, and it deals with the inability for people to be well in these communities. So with that said, we are putting on a venue in April to deal with those pieces. We see conferences all the time. We wanted to deal with restorative capability of people that have been harmed in communities, the actual results of violence, the trauma that's going on throughout the nation because of what's happening in the government, and just the imbalance in terms of people actually not feeling that they have any more hope, killing their families, killing their children, and killing themselves. This has to stop, and we got to stop putting these buffers and alleviating the core of not dealing with the violence that's going on. I don't care what we build. If we don't deal with that aggression and that violence and that hostility that's going on personally and individually in these communities, I don't care what type of infrastructure we're going to build, we are going to see people devastated, and that's what we're seeing.
Wow. For me, I mean, I actually have two. I mean, there's one was, as far as listening, the shows that I enjoyed listening to. I think we had about 2 or 3 episodes that I wasn't able to attend. One of when I was in the Netherlands, and so that was, I enjoyed listening to that one with Doc when you were talking about Peace in the Hood, the book that you had authored. I enjoyed that, which is available on Amazon. Which, if you haven't read that, you need to read Peace in the Hood by Dr. Akil Bashir. And also, you mentioned the fact that you had this training action plan, California Power, at the California Endowment Center on April the 2nd and 3rd, 1000 North Alameda Street in Los Angeles. It's going to be 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's a 2-day session. It's a scenario-driven workshop that you have, and that's kind of goes with your organization and the things that you do. So I enjoyed that piece. But as far as the show that we actually had done, my favorite show was the Veteran Show. And the reason why I like the Veteran Show is because, I mean, being a veteran myself, the one thing that I enjoyed about it is because I believe that where it says that we talked about you know what type of society that you're living in or country you're living with the way that they treat your veterans.
That's right.
And you know, as I go through day by day, I hear people always talking about, you know, thank you for your service, but man, we treat our veterans bad.
Yes, we do.
I mean, real bad. I mean, as far as you know, the way the prosecutors. I mean, you know, the thing about it is, I mean, being a criminal defense attorney and representing veterans. And understanding that when individuals are, you know, decide to join the military, and they use taxpayer dollars to make you a killer, right? I mean, that's what they do. I mean, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was told that they're going to make me a professional killer. So now that you've taken this young man, 18 years old, you've made him a professional killer. You've sent him out to different places like Afghanistan, Iraq, all these other places where they're going in and they're fighting, you know. Seeing the killing and seeing their comrades being killed, then they come back to the United States, you know, without being debriefed, and then they get out here, and then they continue with the, you know, with the killing or the violence, and then once they're arrested and you talk to the prosecutor, you know, and I tell the prosecutors, I mean, this guy, I mean, you know, he was, you know, went through this or he went through that, and then they don't want to hear that. They say, well, you know, well, that's the reason why I want to only give them 16 months in prison instead of giving them, you know, 3 years in prison. You know, the same way with, you know, sometimes even the judges, the way that the courts treat these young men and women that go out here and put their lives on the line for this country. And all we ever hear is on Veterans Day, thank you for your service, man. Come on, man. They're not doing nothing for these kids, man. They really aren't, man. I mean, the way that our country, you know, talks about it and the things that they say to these young men after they done, you know, fought and did the things that they did. And you know, they've done terrible things, you know, and then come back to be treated that way and not to be able to, they treat them lower than anything. And you take someone who's not did anything except graduate from high school, go to college, and now they look down on a man who's actually took his time to go out and serve this country. You know, I mean, I think we treat, and I'm telling you this, and I'll say it to me, we treat our veterans bad, and I'm sick and tired of this. Thank you for your service, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's terrible, and I think that we have to get somewhere to deal with that. We got somebody? I think we got a caller. We only got 2 minutes. Hello, caller.
Yeah, good evening, Zulu, Dr. Broussard, and Rosa.
Hey.
I couldn't get y'all reception nowhere else, no. But anyway, I think you're spot on about that veteran. That was one of my best shows, which I like. I like a lot of your shows, but that one there, it was spot on because even though I wasn't in the military, I was in a war on the street.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
I can't imagine. I can imagine what they was going through, walking around carrying poppers and calling themselves fighting for the country. We was fighting for, you know, streets and money, but you know they fighting for the country. They come back here and they sleeping under bridges. So, you know, and as far as when and my worst, not on y'all show, but the worst thing that I think ever happened this year for me is to see Kanye West and Jim Brown when they had the national audience. And Jim Brown said, and I had the highest respect for Jim Brown. And Jim Brown said, I don't want nothing from you. I don't want nothing. Only thing I want to do is serve. And all he had to do is talk about these inner cities, because he had the American program.
Yes.
This man should have known that he had the whole world watching because they wanted to see how Kanye was going to make a fool out of himself. All they had is Kanye had a problem, but Jim Brown didn't have no problem. At the old age, he wasn't senile or nothing. So they could have asked for more stuff for these youth, more programs.
Right.
But they had an audience. But, you know, that was my worst. And I think the veteran thing was best. But anyway, Happy New Year to you guys.
Well, Happy New Year to you, too.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for calling in and being
Take it easy,
consistent
my
with you.
brother.
I appreciate it, man.
All right,
thank you.
No problem.
All right.
Okay.
All right, man. So we're close. I mean, we're ending that 2018 year, man. So of course, beginning next program next Sunday, we'll be starting our national syndication, which I appreciate the staff for the crew for putting us in, making all that possible, and it'll be available on the Gab Radio Network through satellite systems. We'll also continue to be here on KCAA. We're also going to be broadcasting live at WCGO in Chicago and KSHP Sports Talk, which is also in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be nationally syndicated, and we're going to keep moving on into 2019. And I want to thank each and every one of our listeners and supporters who have listened in and chimed in with us, and every week. We appreciate it, and we're looking forward to having another year of success and talking about more issues and keeping you informed as well as keeping you motivated. Mm-hmm. And so on behalf of the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir, thank you for listening in tonight as well as all year long. We'll see you next year, which is next Sunday, same time, same place, same channel. And until that time, stay blessed.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
In or out, I'm Jeff Nathanson. Game in progress right now. Watching it on NBC. The Colts are leading the Tennessee Titans in a winner-take-all game, 13-0 right now. So far, Tennessee has not really been able to muster up any real offense in this game. The Colts, if they win the game, will get a playoff berth. It's now 7-0. They rolled that touchdown back, so 7-0. But Andrew Luck and the Colts with the football, and they have just thrown a pass that is a touchdown. So now it is 13-0 extra point coming up in this one. It's the winner for the wild card and the loser as the season is over. The footnote to this game, Marcus Mariota